Legends. Welcome Legends. To the stream. Oh, got some double mic issues there. Hope you're well wherever you are. It is the Daily Buyer Show. We dig all charts as they relate to crypto. What is it? The 5th of December, 2025. Jeez, it's almost Christmas. The year's gone so quick. So it's FOMC next week. So as anticipated, we're seeing the FOMC, the pre-FOMC volatility, right? So where the market is expecting that next week we are to get a cut, right? Now this has slipped in. This wasn't here before, 13% increase of a pause, right? So there is some hesitation, and we've been talking about on the stream over the past month that this trajectory of rates has been very volatile. And when you have a volatile trajectory for rates, it doesn't give the market much certainty into, the price of capital, and it doesn't really incentivize, call it risk taking. Okay, so we are still in that high rate environment also, right? So the rates are still very elevated. So even though we are getting a cut next week, right? Well, it is forecasted the market's expecting that cut next week. There's nothing to me that screams new parabola or new price discovery or new all-time highs for Bitcoin. Okay, I want to cover that early. That's been the running theme. In fact, if you watch my stream from yesterday, I do a full breakdown and a full summary of my current bias. I am macro bearish Bitcoin, but I believe that we are due for at least some relief where we are, okay, in current price. And we do have some catalysts that could drive a pretty big counter trend rally. There is some historical precedents, there's some seasonality aligning, and we do have some liquidity catalysts aligning that could drive a decent counter trend rally for Bitcoin. But the key thing that I'll maintain here is that my bias remains bearish, right? My macro bias is bearish. The weekly structure on Bitcoin is bearish. Daily structure is bearish. Many other signals, again, that I discussed yesterday are bearish Bitcoin, hence makes up why I'm macro bearish. It's in my Substack here. I do a weekly Substack, completely free, where I break down the entire market signals. I even include some of the bigger trades that I'm interested in. But we broke this down yesterday as to why I'm bearish. Okay, so I just wanted to cover that early on. But we do have some of those liquidity catalysts aligning, and we are seeing some type of alignment in the charts to suggest that we should get some relief at least soon, and potentially a seasonal rally into maybe the end of the year, maybe it's Q1. But basically we're watching over the next, I think we'll be able to understand what's going to come into fruition over the next week, because as that rate cut occurs, we'll also start to get more data regarding QT ending, regarding the government starting to spend money, because as you know, they've been refilling their wallet, right? Oh, sorry, wrong chart. As you know, they've been refilling their wallet. We've been talking about this $1 trillion level for a while. So if they do start spending, that could also support the short-term counter trend rally. Hence, next week, when the rate cut occurs, if it does stay steady and occur, and we do see QT ending and the balance sheet flattening out, and at the same time the government starts spending, all of this data I've built to come through into my net liquidity indicator, right? And you can just clearly see here, when liquidity expands is when Bitcoin expands. Now, we're not expanding. However, the short-term liquidity catalysts could at least give us short-term liquidity. Okay, and this is where we'll see it. We'll see it in net liquidity, and we should see Bitcoin price respond. So where does that leave us right now? Well, for me personally, when I look at Bitcoin, okay, I'm jumping ahead. I won't go through a lot of the macro charts we usually go through. I did a big deep dive yesterday, going through my bias and all some of the key charts. So just look at yesterday's stream. It's the one called, what's it called? Let me just check here. Stream Crypto Bounce Breakdown. Okay, strongest alts on the radar. So just check out that stream, because I do a deep dive into some of the other charts. I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to try and keep this one a bit shorter. But if we just jump straight into Bitcoin, we've been having this bounce, right? And this bounce, to me, is highly sensitive to what's happening, what's anticipated in rates basically next week, right? So this is the market doing what it usually does and front running, right? It's front running the now what's becoming more certain in the rate cut. You know, only a month ago, it was, less than a month ago, during these time frames, I remember seeing about 2 weeks ago, the rate cut was down to like 30%. So it wasn't even a majority expectation for a rate cut. Just in the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's been all over the joint based on a lot of the data that's been coming out. Okay, we just had a strong unemployment claims, overnight for me, came out on the 4th, right? I'm in Australia, so obviously I'm a bit ahead in time from wherever you are, most likely. But that's where we're seeing, because unemployment claims was strong, right? And when I say strong, I mean less unemployment claims. And labor data is the main data that the Fed's looking at right now to determine the trajectory of rates. Hence, we're seeing that uptick in a potential pause again. And I actually saw it across the 2-year as well. You know, the bonds ticking up overnight because that labor data came in suggesting a slightly stronger labor market. Hence, all of this volatility is what's driving price action at the moment, right? Because we're down in the lows here on Bitcoin. The market's trying to anticipate and kind of speculate and front run a rate cut. But ultimately, when I look at the structure and I think about the liquidity catalysts, they're not major liquidity drivers that's going to do this, right? Weekly structure is bearish, so we need to be up here before weekly can even turn bullish. So that leaves a massive room for us to move even right up to here and still be bearish and still head back down this way. Okay, the daily high is here. So a start would be trading above here to at least reverse the daily structure. Basically, right now, the bounce, we've had our first week of bullish price action last week, closed as an inside bar. Now we've swept both sides of last week's liquidity. So we don't have a strong signal on whether buyers or sellers are more dominant and taking over. This is a bit of a holding pattern, I call it, right? Where heading into next week, being the key volatility driver, it's a bit of a sit on my hands kind of moment, because my macro bias suggests that I should be less hesitant to jump into shorts. Okay, but considering we've swept the highs and we've swept the lows, I don't really have decisive action here. So this makes me think, okay, just sit on your hands till next week and let's see how it all unfolds. Because typically going into the FOMC, we'll get a lot more volatility. And after the FOMC, once Jay Powell starts his press conference, that's often where we'll get a lot of the volatility. And it's not till after that's all done and over the next week where we'll see more of the decisive price action. We'll see the decisive moves, right? So do I want to be a part of this volatility right now? Not really, right? Because I just would like to get involved with the more decisive move. And in the same time window over the next 2 weeks, we're likely to get the data we need to see to give us more trajectory on that other liquidity if it's flowing through, i.e. the government spending, and if the Fed QT ending is actually doing anything meaningful in the balance sheet. So I don't need to front run any of that. I'm happy to just wait, let the market give us a signal, because we're in this phase of market where it doesn't pay to be a bull here, right? Because the structure's bearish. It's actually going to pay to be a bear if we're going to continue. Let's jump into stablecoin dominance. Now, this is a very important chart. If you've been keeping up with my streams, I apologize that I'm into this chart again, but I also don't apologize because you're going to be on your toes for the next move if you're with me here and you're watching this chart, right? This is what happened last cycle when we moved into the bear market. The bands confirmed green. These are the TT bands. There's no rocket science here. It's just a 12 and a 21 EMA that I've created a little script for to turn bullish and bearish, and they've worked very well for crypto and on the macro on the weekly timeframes. So when the bands turn bullish and you've got weekly structure, bullish weekly structure in stablecoin dominance, okay, this is telling you that participants are moving into stablecoins. They only do that when they're exiting the market, right? So last cycle, you can see when we broke the range with bullish structure and green bands, we're heading into a deep bear market, okay? We're at the top of the range. We've already got the bands confirming, and we've got weekly bearish structure, right? Look at this range. Okay, we've got the weekly bearish, got the bands confirmed. Heading up here is going to be disastrous. Well, disastrous for the bulls, I should say. Beautiful for the bears, right? But that just means we're going into a deeper bear market. And alts and Bitcoin can go much lower, right? They can go much lower than where they are if that's happening. However, we get a little turnaround here. Okay, from here to here and even down here would be a massive rally in crypto. That'd be a massive counter trend rally, and we're gonna just be watching structure if that happens and interaction with the bands, because you can see here last cycle in 2022, January to March, that's where you had that massive. That was the biggest bear market rally of the last bear market. Okay, so that was the biggest counter trend rally, and you see here how the bands never turned red and the structure never confirmed weekly bearish. Well, we'll be looking for similar things in how structure develops here. Okay, now, yeah, so that's on watch, right? In a nutshell, up, bearish continuation, major bear market, prices are going to go much lower. Down gives us a counter trend rally. Okay. Now, if we head back to, actually we haven't looked at Bitcoin dominance in a little while. All right, so Bitcoin dominance, particularly at this point in time, right? If it's going to do this, right, during a counter trend rally, and we can already tell that the bands have confirmed bearish. The last time they did that, alts significantly outperformed. So this is February 2021, right down to the end of the cycle, all through here. Okay, and if you look at the weekly bands, confirmed that the major rotation was happening. The weekly bands have confirmed here. So this suggests to me, if we keep continuing down like this, the counter trend rally, the best returns in the counter trend rally aren't going to come from Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin's putting in, so we know that it turned over like this. Bitcoin's going to be putting in its shoulder, right, to go lower. And alts, depending on which alts you're looking at and what setups there are, during this move up in Bitcoin where it potentially goes, maybe it goes to here or to here, which is from, you know, another at best 15% up before it potentially rolls over. You got many alts that have already done 30, 40, 50, 100% in just these 2 weeks of bullish price action that we're in the middle of now. So case in point, I was just looking at Fartcoin before. You know, I've heard the thesis on Fartcoin, which makes a lot of sense, is that hot air rises, right? So that's some of these coins crack me up. But if you just look at Fartcoin, since Bitcoin has been having its 2 weeks of bullish price action, this week inclusive, and it's done its, you know, 5% or whatever it's done, Fartcoin's done 133%. Hence, if you're trading the counter trend rally, if this thesis is correct, my current thesis that, you know, the current liquidity catalysts will drive liquidity, but short-term liquidity. So we could see Santa rally, maybe even Q1, Jan kind of rally. Then the biggest bang for buck is going to come through these altcoins, right? Things like potentially Fartcoin. You know, there's many different alts. And in my last stream, I went through how I used my token rotation indicator to quickly flick through charts and find the ones you should be playing with and avoid the junk, right? Because this indicator shows you the flow of capital flowing into a token, the rotational flows based on the majors, right? And it shows you over these time periods. So when you see from 1 day to 1 month lighting up green, that means this token is outperforming on all these time series. So anytime in the last month, if you bought this token, you're outperforming the majors, which shows you rotational flows. And I'll show you what the inverse looks like. This is what distribution looks like, right? Where you've got the lower time frames lighting up red, okay? So this token rotation indicator, if you want this indicator, just DM me on X and I'll give it to you. This helps you pick out the strong coins and trade them. So for example, look, I'll just scroll through tokens here. No flows just yet. This is showing some flows. What's this? Bitcoin Cash. Then you go in and you look technically if it looks good. Does the price action look like it might be a good setup? Right, so this is like your torch in the dark. You use this to identify if it's catching rotational flows. Then if you've got your trade set up there, then you know you're trading with rotational flows plus your setup. You can just flick through charts, seeing some flows there in quant. Nia, no flows, wouldn't touch it. Jasmy, no flows. Look at it. Anytime in the last year, if you bought this token, you are underwater, right? And if you're still holding it versus Bitcoin, ETH, or Solana, you're worse off. And remember, your goal in crypto, if you're trading altcoins, is to outperform the majors. Otherwise, you may as well just be trading the majors, right? So again, this rotation indicator gives you the best read on when you should be getting in and when you should be getting out. And when you should touch something altogether. Like if you're looking at Jasmy, for example, and you're saying, oh, I see something in the fundamentals, in the on-chain, whatever it is, and I see that there's a big move that's going to unfold, right? What I would do is then wait for the rotational flows to come in through this indicator. When you see the 14, 21 days, 1 month start lighting up green, that means capital's rotating into this asset versus the majors. And then you look for your technical setup along the way. Okay, maybe you've reversed structure, for example. You see the daily lows being swept and we've reversed structure, got on top of the bands, coming back in with the bands as support and the bands have flicked green. Okay, and you got structure, you look for your triggers, you're trading the right side of the V, okay, and you got rotational flows flowing through, then you potentially have a good trade. But that's how, again, you just use this indicator. And most importantly, when to get out. You don't want to get stuck bag holding this stuff, right? And especially when we're in a highly rotational environment. In fact, this whole cycle has been very rotational for alts. Okay, if you've just been buying stuff and holding it, you probably haven't made any money, you know. But if you were rotational and, for example, you were using this indicator, and when you spotted the 1 day to 21 day timeframes lighting up red, that would have been your cue to say, hey, capital's rotating back out of this token now. I need to also be getting out and exiting. Okay. This indicator I built has made me and saved me so much money, especially during this cycle. See here, nothing, doesn't even look appealing. Chart's ugly. Floki, why would you touch it yet? No rotational flows. Right, see how you can just quickly flick through. I don't even need to look at what the chart is. I know, oh, here we go. I see some rotation happening. What is this? SWE. Okay, SWE I know has good, call it pumpamentals, meaning it still has a decent attention share. Like, people still talk about it. It's an L1 tech. I can see some rotational flows coming through. This might be on my watch list, right, to be able to trade. Now, in fact, it is on my watch list and I'm watching this one. But this is where, again, you might look for your setups. But again, using this rotational indicator, you can easily just flick through and identify rotational strength versus weakness. See, none of these, no reason to touch any of these. Here we go. What's this? Well, we're back on Filecoin. See it? See it? You can see clearly strength, and look at the chart. We're seeing it. We're seeing the V come in, all right? Filecoin is something I'm looking to trade as a sol beta. What's this one now? ETH. Oh, well, there you go. So ETH's looking good as well. I've got a good, I actually posted ETH as a setup I am looking to trade in the counter trend thesis, right? So here, ETH counter trend rally setup. Now this is my Substack. You can, it's free. Just jump on my X, and please follow me there if you're on my X, and you can get. I've posted this, basically what I'm looking for in this. Okay, the ideal bullish setup. But just in general, again, just coming back to that indicator, we're seeing this. We're seeing rotational strength as well. All right. Let's just keep flicking through some charts. Nothing that exciting. Nothing that exciting. Nope. 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 Well, this one. Okay, so that's Binance. Okay, so here's a sign on Binance where it had parabola. The parabola is clearly broken, right? So look. We've broken the parabola and it's lost flows. So see how pretty much up until 3 months ago, it was consistently outperforming the other majors. And now ETH is starting to outperform it. Fragmented Sol, it's not really outperforming Bitcoin much. This is showing you rotation out of this asset along with the parabola being broken. So again, aligning with the general context, you got a major sweep that happens at into the peak that shows exhaustion, right? So that was the major warning signal there. So to me, I've got this marked out on my other charts where this will be one of the bigger shorts that I'll be looking to get involved with when Bitcoin creates that lower high and is starting to roll over, right? When Bitcoin starts creating that next lower high and is rolling over, that's where I'm going to be looking for some of these alts to short. And I'm looking at this weekly gap here into Binance coin. So if we get the counter trend rally somewhere into here and we see that momentum starting to fade, I'll be looking to short that down into deep bear market territory. Right. Go back out to the daily. Now, if you're using my rotation indicator, only use it on the daily. Right. So we just keep flicking through charts, see where we can find some strength early, but it's not enough. It's only a week of rotation and it's not strong rotation. Look at the percentages. Aave, a little bit. We can see here some rotation was happening, but it's losing momentum. It's losing strength in its flows. Yeah, like why would you touch any of this stuff? See how you can quickly filter through so many charts, and just that's what's important in trading, is knowing what not to touch, right? Especially when it comes to trading altcoins, because you're going to hear so many people shill you a million different coins if you're sitting on X, right? Mantle, you can see it had some strength, but this shows you the clear distribution and the rotation out. So this shows you how this indicator would have saved you from being a bag holder, because you got pretty much from three months to 10 months where it outperformed. You can see, again, you can see the parabola. The parabola's broken down, okay? And then on top of that, 3 months ago, you would have started to see red filtering through on these lower time frames, indicating that the rotation was happening out of this asset. At the same time, the parabola was breaking down. So you should have been getting out of here, because you've got the you got the rotation indicator telling you that capital is exiting this token. Okay, and now you can clearly see it here. Since 2 months ago, it hasn't caught any new rotational flows. So there was a clear exit, and that was it. You should have been out of this thing, right? Shouldn't have been bag holding it. Link, there we go. See how we can see these lighting up? This is showing us rotational strength, okay? And given that ETH is, I've already mentioned to you, I'm interested in ETH as a setup. This would be a good beta token that I'm interested in to be looking at for the counter trend rally, because obviously if ETH goes up 10%, this might go up 20%, right, as a beta. This is what I'd be interested in. This is the kind of thing I'm looking for. First and foremost, I can see rotational strength, meaning capital is rotating into this token over the majors. Now I'd be looking at my other signals and triggers in my system to trade this thing. So if I was looking at this, first and foremost, that's the daily structure high. So price is bullish above here, okay, because since here, right, here didn't make a new low, so this is now internal bullish structure, meaning until a new low is created, I don't know that this is my last lower high. Okay, so when internal bullish structure is creating like this, I call it a complex pullback. If you jump on my YouTube, go into the building block series, I explain complex pullbacks, right? So this just means at the very least, we could range, something else is happening. Because when price moves aggressively in a direction, right, it doesn't do complex pullbacks, meaning on the same time frame, it won't start doing this, okay? Unless it's either building up liquidity, or it's potentially preparing to reverse, okay? Or it's just taking its time, right? It's just chopping about, it's just a big range. So at the very least, when a complex pullback happens, we got to, at the very least, we've got to understand that something else is happening, and it could take time for this to develop. It's not going to just keep shooting off in that same direction. So in this environment where we think there's a potential counter trend and it's starting a complex pullback, well, maybe it wants to push up into these highs before it rolls over. The better setup for me would be sweep the lows, okay, brings the high down here, shows us some type of exhaustion here, and then build some new structure. At the same time, you know, reclaim these bands. Maybe the bands turn green, we get a nice V here, and we're trading this right side. But hence, just in a nutshell, again, just coming back, rotation indicators showing me capital flows. I've got this on my watch list of coins that I'm interested in trading as the counter trend develops. And now just kind of tying back to what I was saying earlier, with the liquidity and the volatility window we're in, I'm not really interested in getting in heavily into any positions right now, because I want to see what happens at the rate cut, how it's all digested, and I want to actually wait for the market to start showing me more intent of the direction it's heading in. All right, we've gone through. I think you get the point with this, where you can just kind of flick through. Didn't plan to go through this indicator again and start digging through altcoins, but here we are. I guess that's the beauty of live streaming, and when I've got nothing prepared, we just sit down and dig through charts together. Right, so where should we end this thing? I guess maybe we should just quickly recap You know, Bitcoin is bearish, weekly structure's bearish. The bigger macro trade is to wait for the weekly lower high to develop and look to be getting involved in the short. If you're here with me on this channel and you're following along, you know, I will be sharing all the signals and triggers as I see it. Okay, but in the interim, this move from here to here, if that's where it is, likely signals massive counter trend rallies, especially in alts where they will outperform. So what are we watching right now? We're watching FOMC next week, and we're just being cautious of the volatility going into FOMC. And I think we're going to probably get more clarity on direction for the rest of the month into the year's end, and potentially into Q1 after the FOMC. So being patient, waiting for the best setups, the best trades to rise to the surface, and then we'll pounce. That's it for today, legends. Hope you enjoyed the stream. I'm here daily at the Bitcoin close. Please like, please subscribe, follow me on X. I post there regularly. If you want to see something in particular, drop me a comment. Yeah, hope to see you again in a future stream. I'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, legends.